Oké, goedenavond iedereen. Welkom in het derde Groene Gesprek van het project naar een groen en leefbaarder Paramaribo. Vandaag gaat de discussie in het Engels zijn, omdat we een speciale gast hebben uit Puerto Rico. Dus ik ga vanaf nu overschakelen naar het Engels. Maar u hoeft zich geen zorgen te maken. Als jullie straks mee willen doen aan de discussie, kunnen jullie ook gewoon in het Nederlands vragen stellen. En dan spelen we die in het Engels door. So, good evening and welcome everyone. This is our third online session for the project towards a green and more livable Paramaribo. My name is Lisa Best and I work at Tropenbos Suriname coordinating this project. And with me tonight, we have my colleague Davita Oberg. And we have three guest speakers. We have Errol Gesius, who is the secretary of the United Tour Guides of Suriname. We have Dr. Pablo Mendes Lazaro, who is an associate professor of the Environmental Health Department at the Graduate School of Public Health in Puerto Rico. And we have Sherida Morman, who is the director of Mets Travel and Tours. Yes, we're going to briefly introduce the project to you and the topic of tonight, and then I will give the floor to our guest speakers. So our project towards a green and more livable Paramaribo is a twinning project that we implement together with the University of Twente in the Netherlands. And we've been doing this project since March 2019. And more information on all our activities can be found on the website of the project, which is www.groenparamaribo.org. And yeah, we started organizing these online sessions in July because, well, like everybody else, we are also dealing with COVID-19, and it's not possible for us to do our usual engagement and awareness activities outside in person, which would be much nicer. But fortunately, we have these options with Zoom, so that is why we're all here online. These conversations are a way to trigger our minds, to give us some food for thought on the very different ways in which urban green space contributes to our well-being. So we've had our first session was on cultural and historical heritage of urban green space. We talked about the Cultuurtuin and the Palmentuin. And our last session was on urban green space and the provision of food, which is also very relevant in these times. And tonight, the topic is the beauty and benefits of urban green space for tourism. So as you all know, Suriname is often branded internationally as the most forested country and with a capital that is on the UNESCO heritage list. While most tourists travel to Suriname to experience the jungle deep in the interior, there are also some activities that they can do much closer to the city to spot animals and experience nature. And some cities in the world are famous for their urban green spaces and how they attract so many tourists from all over, like the cherry blossom trees in Japan or Central Park in New York or Botanical Gardens in South American cities. And it just happens that this Sunday is World Tourism Day. So we thought it would be nice to also talk about this topic in this context. So the question for tonight is there value in urban green spaces for tourism in Paramaribo? What can we learn from examples abroad? And what would best fit in our tropical and cultural context? I'm excited to introduce the different speakers to you because they all have very interesting topics. So I will go right ahead and start with our first speaker, who is Errol Gesius. He is born and raised in Paramaribo, Suriname, and has been working as a nature tour guide for more than 10 years already, mainly in protected areas. And at an early age, he was interested in everything concerning nature, participating in different research projects, and he has about 15 years of experience in nature education in the field through a youth club, the Wildlife Rangers, which is under Stinasu. And as the secretary of the United Tour Guides of Suriname, he is working on professionalizing one of the nicest jobs there is, and also as a teacher in vocational tourism education. He believes that it's as much about teaching as well as inspiring students to respect and value nature. So Errol, the floor is yours. You can share your slides with us. And also unmute your microphone, please. Your microphone is still on mute.
Okay. Yes.
You can hear you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity and congratulations on this the webinar, Program Boss and the whole organization. I feel honored to participate in this webinar. So this is a very important topic because sometimes people don't see the benefits of a tree. It's just standing there, you know. And the potential value of urban green space for tourists and visitors, you know, the locals have to understand that first. And then we can, you know, display it to the outside world as, you know, very proudly that, okay, we are the most greenest, the greenest country in the world. So let me have a give a short statement that there is no comparison value of, you know, the emotional and the spiritual value of green and of nature, you know, because that is priceless. What somebody sees spiritually, you cannot you know, price that. You cannot put that in any number of money. So we're talking about the other side of the value. And people like to move from the to the city when knowing that they can every now and then they can go back to nature to you know, to chill, to say it popularly, or to calm down. So as a retreat back to into nature. Another thing is that a green environment stimulates the creative mind. I don't think only about, you know, artists or painters, but also designers and engineers, IT specialists, and unfortunately, you know, weaponry. So a lot of ideas come out when people connect with nature. And a green environment around us calms us down, give us rest, and is in free time a source for to calm your minds and somewhere you can relax. So I hope this is clear until now. Okay, so from a guide point of view, the nature in Paramaribo, especially in Paramaribo, the inner city, is very important. You know, Paramaribo, the inner city is on the UNESCO World Heritage List, but it's an area which is on the list of the UNESCO, including the monumental trees. So not only the old buildings and the monuments are on this list, but also the monumental trees. And those trees are, some of them are as old as 250 years old. And people, you know, when we walk as a guide with guests, then usually you will find yourself standing in the shade of a building or in the shade of a tree. Because people avoid the heat of the city, especially when you have a lot of paved road and the zinc roofs. Then the city generates a lot of heat, and I know that I experienced that people like to stand in the shade of a tree. So there are three, let's say, small green spaces in Paramaribo. So the one is in Fort Zeelandia. It's a fortress, one of the oldest residents in Suriname, the western residents, because Suriname was populated by the Amerindians, as we know. So Fort Zeelandia is one of the oldest places. It's a fortress. And the second one is the Palmertuin. We also say Palm Garden. That is a garden of the royal palm tree, which is originated from the Caribbean, I guess from Jamaica. And the third one is the Cultuurtuin, so the culture garden. That is a little bit outside the center, as one of the most forested places in Paramaribo Center. And each one of these places has like a unique story, special story to tell to the tourists. So about the Palm Garden, so as I said, the Palm Garden consists mainly of royal palm trees. And the nice thing is that this garden was established in the 17th century by one of the governors who, as the story goes, he had an Amerindian wife, so he wanted to feel like being in the forest for a little bit. So he planted these trees, these palm trees. But it was also believed that those palms brought you luck and wealth when you planted them near your garden. This is also a few of the palm trees, and one of the unique thing about this palm garden is it was an Amerindian village. Back in the days, the Paramuru was the chief of the village, and you could put your boat near the Paramuru in the Paramuru Creek, and that's why it's now derived to Paramaribo. So that's the name of an Amerindian village before Columbus was lost. So, as a tour guide, well, as an activity in the center or in the Palm Garden, you can have culinary events. So there are many events happening in the Palm Garden. One of the main important ones is the Amerindian Day, that is the 9th of August, where you can have delicious achupo or kadekra, also known as pepper pot. So that's one of the main things. And also performance, how you say it, spoken words, arts performance. So that's one of the effects of nature, giving people to, make their mind free up and have their words come out very, freely. But think about something like this, a culinary event where in nature, where you taste the special gastronomy of one's country. So the next slide is about Cultuurtuin, and Cultuurtuin is also a very unique place where it's a little bit forested, but the trees which are planted there are from all over the world. And I happen to know that one of the tree species, I don't know the name, so excuse me for the name, but one of the tree species is in the original country is almost extinct. And here in Suriname, this tree species still exists. So it is a like how you say it, in a gathering, a botanical garden of different trees all over the world, and also local trees. It's a place where people go and especially doing fitness, running, and also spotting of sloths, leopards. So this is a very unique place where, but unfortunately, it was a little bit of non, of, not well maintained. But now people's eyes are opened wide up, and last Friday we had a cleanup culture turn on the cleanup day. So trees bring you coolness and a clean and gives you shade and a coolness for people, buildings, and paved roads. Clean air and a clean atmosphere prevents erosion and delivers medicinal substances and TFPs, this non-timber forest products. And also, oh, I'm a little bit too fast. Also, trees, people might not know that, but trees communicate maybe a lot more than people might think, because the trees are standing on one place. They cannot move if something will threaten them, but still they communicate a lot more than other organisms, because in terms of the pollination or the seed dispersion. So the tree you see there, that's the Ceiba pentandra, that's our wild kapok tree. It is pollinated by bats. So if you would stand underneath a wild kapok tree, which is flowering, then you would see a lot of bats pollinating the trees, and it's a very nice thing to see, to witness. So what are the challenges of this of the green spaces in Paramaribo? The challenges are protecting and maintaining and monitoring these little tree green spaces, because they're threatened by not only the gases, the smoke, and etc. Also by ignorance. People think that the trees grow old and die, but if you take care of them very nicely, they outlive generations. One of the things also is the illumination of the surroundings of the trees. Put more lights and light spots where people at night can reside under the trees. And also in China, there is a 1,000-year-old tea tree, and the tea from that tree is 10 times more expensive than other tea. So from a tour guide perspective, then we can say that there is a static story about, let's say, a building or a monument. Something happened in history. So when you combine that with the dynamic story of nature and trees around you, then you can mention things like the history of the tree, why was the tree planted there, what does it do medicinal-wise. You can talk about the biodiversity of Suriname. You can talk about the fruit, gastronomic purposes, and the coolness of the location, and also about the birds, because many of those trees are also homes of birds and other animals. Regularly, we see a lot of iguanas in the trees around the Fort Zeelandia. So at last, I would like to say that trees have open apex. That means that they grow continuously. Let's take care of our trees, and then we know that our well-being or well-being is guaranteed. Thank you for listening. I hope that my presentation was clear enough.
Yes, thank you, Errol, for that nice presentation about the green spaces that we have in Paramaribo and why we should take care of them. With that, I would just like to remind everybody who is watching that you can always ask questions in the Q&A box. Dus er is een speciale vraag- en antwoord-box, dus niet in de chat. We will have the discussion after all of the presentations, but you can already write your questions if you have them. So I will introduce now our next speaker. Yes, you might see a poll, a very short survey on your screen. So we ask you to just give your answers so that we have an idea of what our audience is thinking. So you will see a short poll that Davita has launched just now. And it's asking if you think that green space in Paramaribo has value for tourism. Okay, in the meantime, I will introduce Sherida. Sorry, our next speaker is Pablo. Dr. Pablo Mendez Lazaro is currently an associate professor at the Department of Environmental Health at the University of Puerto Rico at the Graduate School of Public Health. And he has been involved in multiple researches on analyzing climate and weather extreme events and the impact of that on public health. And he is also one of the multiple PIs in research projects funded by NASA and the NSF. And Dr. Mendez Lazaro has done some interesting work with regard to climate change and tourism. So Pablo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Errol, for that wonderful presentation. I like it a lot. I love the pictures. Never been in Suriname, and I want to go there. Thank you for the invitation. For me, it's an honor to be here. I will try to share my screen. I will try to sorry that I'm a Spanish speaker. I'm from Puerto Rico. I speak English. So if you don't understand something that I'm trying to say, just please let me know. I will turn off also my video because my own internet is unstable. And again, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful opportunity of sharing experiences from Puerto Rico. I call it the value of urban green spaces for tourism in the context of climate change, because one of the things that we have been struggling, at least in Puerto Rico, that have been impacting all of the socio-ecological and technological systems, have been the consequence of different natural hazards and these environmental threats that are in somehow threatening public health, well-being, and the environment. So, can you see my screen, Lisa?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That means that most of the other people can see it as well. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiarized, Puerto Rico is one little island in the middle of the Caribbean. Perhaps you have heard about Puerto Rico since the hurricane season in 2017, because the hurricane season during 2017 was a very active one, and the Caribbean, most of the Caribbean islands suffered two very powerful hurricanes in a matter of 2 weeks, Hurricane Irma and then Hurricane Maria. Both of them destroying US Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico as well. So this little square here is Puerto Rico. It's about 8,000 square kilometers. And we have like 3.2, 3.5 million people living in this island. It's a US territory, as the US Virgin Islands as well. So the context for tourism in Puerto Rico is that it was one of the most important economic sectors before the COVID cases started to rising in the Caribbean. the COVID cases started to register on March 2020, and the first case arrived to Puerto Rico in March 13. So the government made executive orders and made lockdowns and curfews, impacting not only socio-ecological conditions, but also tourism activities. So everything was closed since March 2020 in Puerto Rico. But before the COVID-19 arrived and changed all the worldwide life, the world as we know it, for all of us in many countries, we used to receive like 4.6, 4.9 million visitors to the island, coming by cruise ship or the international airport. In terms of the budget, the tourism sector represents almost 6% of the gross domestic product in the island. However, and the most important company that had been promoted and sponsoring tourism activities in Puerto Rico is called the Puerto Rico Tourism Company. And they have a 50-year anniversary this year on 2020. Well, COVID-19 have changed all of the plans for them. So you can imagine they are the Puerto Rico Tourism Company, they are doing anniversary, 50th anniversary, but they cannot do what they want to plan to do. So again, most of the different planning, urban housing and tourism projects that have been executed in Puerto Rico, and this is something that I think that it needs to consider in all of the countries, had been done without in the past, right? I'm not talking about now in the beginning. I will give you a couple of examples, but most of the business as usual and traditional tourism of having big hotels and big resorts and these huge infrastructures in front of the beaches or in front of natural environments had been done without meaningful participation from the local communities. So that aspect, that providing sufficient jobs, employment, and improving the quality of life was not taken under consideration many years ago, right? So this is our example. The picture in the middle is the city of San Juan. This is the heart of business as usual and traditional hotels and resort built in the shoreline. And as you can see, most of them have been suffering from coastal erosion, sea level rise, and so many other climate hazards associated with climate change that are exacerbating the vulnerability of this infrastructure to affront or to address this kind of hazard, right? So we can see a couple of tourists in the left picture and in the right picture trying to pass through the coastline in the beaches. And one of the things that we are not specifically green power. And you can see how, for example, this kind of urban planning have been not adequate and in coordination with the environment. And it's not only impacting habitats and endangered species, as it was mentioning Harold, but it also impacting human life. As for example, you cannot take advantage of the beach as you used to it, as you can see for the visitors that are swimming in the middle of the debris. So climate change is an important thing to consider. And when we talk about climate change, I don't know specifically how many climate hazards are you addressing in Suriname, but in the case of Puerto Rico, we are struggling with hurricanes every year, every season. We're still now in the peak of the hurricane season. And as you notice, we already ended all of the names for the hurricane season of 2020. We struggling with drought. That means that water scarcity is a huge problem, and water accessibility is an important component for tourism, for recreation, for hygiene, for everything, right? Floods, coastal floods, and heat waves. Something very important that mentioned also Hero is that this kind of vegetation is important for urban heat islands because it's mitigating the heat or the climate inside of urban areas where exacerbate the thermal comfort in the urban environments. So the other component is urban planning and landscape, right? How do we interact with nature? And these are a couple of pictures in the middle central part of Puerto Rico, right after Hurricane Maria. We created a couple of groups of brigades providing supplies and resources to disadvantaged communities in the central part of the island. And urban planning is considered one of the most effective and successful instrument to avoid natural hazards. So I showed you a couple of pictures in the coastline, and now I'm showing you pictures also where we, with bad regulation and the lack of urban planning and good policies, we are allowing people to get exposed to this kind of physical hazards that they are not in good relationship with nature. And this is a huge problem also in Puerto Rico. And the National Climate Assessment that it was published in 2018 mentioned that, for example, the Caribbean region are compounded by a low level of adaptive capacity due in part to the high cost of mitigation and adaptation measures relatively to the region gross domestic product. So this is a real problem for the island. And it caused also the blue tarps phenomenon. That means that this is in the city of San Juan. This is one of the waterways. The city of San Juan has a lot of waterways because it's an estuary. It's an estuary zone, and we have a lot of mangroves and channels. But a lot of people lose their roof in their houses because also of the material construction that they were dealing. And nowadays, it's a shame that we still have hundreds of thousands of people with our safe roof on top of them after 3 years after the hurricane. These are other examples in the coastline of Puerto Rico. So how do we, if we are not building with nature and understanding that Mother Nature, as was mentioned in Harold, it needs to be respect and it's something that we need to understand. It will avoid this kind of situation, and maybe we will take advantage of those natural resources in a better way. I'm hoping that we have learned something out of this in Puerto Rico, not only in the central part, but also in the coastal area, because all of these areas are potential areas for tourism, because are our most powerful natural resources. So something that mentioned Harold that is very important is about the ecosystem services, right? And in the context of tourism, this is very important because all of the green spaces, no matter if they are in the rural areas or if they are in the cities, they provide essential services to human life and to improve the quality of life. For example, they provide support, that Harold was talking about the nutrient. They provide the soil formation and the primary production for agriculture. So they also, so that's supporting. They provide food, fresh water. They control the climate, because if you have a lot of trees and you have a green infrastructure, you will be able to minimize those increasing air surface temperature that are part of climate change. And also the cultural aspect of this Mother Nature ecosystem, as was mentioned also by Harold. So the aesthetic and the spiritual part of the green infrastructure, all of them provide us security, health, good social relations, and so many other things that is, I think is we are underestimating in somehow the potential that this area have, not only for tourism activity, but to improving also quality of life. As opportunity, I also have to highlight, I just mentioned a couple of mistakes that we have done or things that need to be addressed in Puerto Rico in order to be better prepared for climate change and tourism activities. But I need to acknowledge also that the Puerto Rico Tourism Company have promoted sustainable tourist facilities, agritourism, community-based tourism. This means that community-based organizations that are well organized, they are leading their own program of tourism in Puerto Rico. And this exists in 2006. That means that we have 14 years already working with sustainable tourism in Puerto Rico. And nowadays, they're also trying to address with each of one of the different sustainable tourism activities in Puerto Rico, the Sustainable Development Goals. And for example, they have identified that the sustainable tourist facilities are helping Puerto Rico to address number 7, 8, 9, and 12. I'm not going into details in one of them, going very quickly. But then the community-based organizations that are doing tourism also are working with no poverty, are working with decent work and economic growth, and some other types of the sustainable development goals. So tourism and ecosystem are helping us to improve the quality of life in Puerto Rico by following the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is another example that we were able to develop with a community-based organization. I'm not in the picture because I'm the one taking the picture. So the one with the white shirt in the picture is Patrick. He's from Troy University in Georgia. The one with the dark green shirt is Brennan. He's the director of U.S. Department of Agriculture, Southern Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program. The one with the green fluorescent t-shirt is the community leader of COSAO. COSAO is a community-based organization that is focused on providing sustainable, improving socioeconomic conditions in disadvantaged communities in the rural part of Puerto Rico, but also providing opportunities for young people to not migrate to the city and to stay in rural communities, but to have opportunity for employment and decent employment. And one of the strengths that they identify is agrotourism, because they are an agricultural region. They have a strength of producing coffee, but now they want to diversify the type of employment that they have there, because not everybody wants to be an agriculture, right, a farmer. So if we are able to diversify the jobs in the region, it might be more attractive for young people to stay. So tourism is not only about providing a service, but it's also about improving socioeconomic conditions, and it can be mixed with other kinds of activities. In terms of tourism and climate, well, Puerto Rico offers a lot of opportunities in terms of climate conditions because we are in the Caribbean. But let's go to the city again. Let's go back to the city again. And something that was mentioned by Harold again, how the green spaces are able to reduce air surface temperature in urban environment. This is very important. People are not only looking shade from buildings, but also looking shades and cooling from the green environment. And this is our Telmar infrared images that we did for San Juan. And this is the municipality's boundaries in San Juan. San Juan is the capital city in Puerto Rico. And the red colors you can see are the highest temperature during the morning in the left side of the screen. And then the second one are the air surface temperature measured with infrared sensors, but in the afternoon. And if we take a look on the right side of the screen, then we can see how water bodies, which this is a lagoon, are blue colors, and the blue colors mean that they are very cooler than the airport, for example, which is a high surface density concrete urban area, as opposite from the lagoon. And then also we have the Botanical Garden. We also have a Botanical Garden that is providing a lot of regulation and controlling not only floods and water quality, but on providing oxygen, but also regulating temperature in the city. So these are our lungs in the city, and are very important to keep it, to maintain it. So again, green infrastructures are able to provide so many components in terms of improving quality of life and climate adaptation options that I wanted to bring that into the discussion. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I will stop talking right away.
Thank you so much, Pablo, for sharing your insights with us. We're happy you could join. I will immediately move to the next speaker, so we will still have some time for discussion. Sherida Morman is our next speaker. And Sherida is the director of METS Travel and Tours. She is a development economist, and she is a consultant specialized in tourism and agribusiness development. She has also co-developed Suriname's National Tourism Strategic Plan for 2020 and is a board member of the Steering Committee of Recreation Facilities in the district of Para, as well as a board member of the United Tour Guides Suriname. So Sherida, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank very much.
And
Thank you for being that I could do this presentation. You hear me loud and clearly?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So my presentation will be about the Paramaribo urban nature heritage, opportunities for tourism business development. But in fact, it's about development of business in general. This is just a definition about land use planning, urban green spaces and open space areas, reserved for parks and other green spaces, etc. But I specifically highlighted a land use planning because that is one of the important things for Paramaribo, specifically in case of urban densification. Then we have a lot of space in Paramaribo that can be used for parks and reserved for green spaces. So what are the key benefits of urban space investment? I'm specifically focusing on investments because it's a business as well. It's not only aesthetic, it's beautiful, but also ecological. Human beings living with nature for climate purposes. It has impact on the high temperatures, and it also has impacts on the air quality. But specifically nowadays, the impact on public health is very, very important because when you have these green spaces, it's good for all ages. So it's good for respiratory health, and it's already also proven that for mental health, urban spaces are very important. And in the end of the day, it's also about the economy, the positive impact on the economy. So what are the key tourism businesses? As you can see of tourism business, as you can see on my left, it's about entertainment, relaxing, food, transport, education, etc., waste management. This counts for the same of these urban spaces: entertainment, relaxing, great food, transport, edutainment, art, security, trade, the whole list. And instead of just food, I highlighted great food. We are sometimes only focusing on calling food healthy food. I think we should, if we give it another name, great food, then it might not have more commercial impact. So we have to do business with urban green. Why? Because it's important to sustain. We have a lot of spaces, and there were a lot of discussion these days about the Cultuurtuinlaan, where somebody had some impact or did some cleanup, negative in a negative way of the Cultuurtuinlaan. But that made people aware about the importance of Cultuurtuinlaan, because otherwise, for many others, it was just a piece of forest, and it has nothing to do with the economy. So if we look at the annual visitors, of course, this is before COVID, then we had annually about 260,000 visitors, which the average expenditure is about 950 USD. And we have about 600,000 inhabitants. So let's assume that 200,000 of these visitors spent about 10 US dollars in our parks, in the green spaces that we have. That would be about 2 million US dollars. Then our problem with maintenance would be something for history. The same goes for the local visitors. But in fact, and why do I put this high amount of visitors from tourist visitors, about 210,000? Because the majority of the visitors visiting Suriname, they have to come to Paramaribo. They are visiting to Paramaribo because the hotels are here, everything is kind of centralized. So they all are visiting, about 90% is visiting Paramaribo. So why not benefit from these visits and have more than only the restaurants specifically and the traditional places. Why not use our urban green spaces to be able to maintain them, to sustain them, and to have benefit for the total economy and socially, as in for the health sector as well. The thing is, we need to stay current. We need to say current means, because everybody we know Palmertuin, we know Cultuurtuinlaan, those places, those specific green places that we have. But since they are not current, since we are not recreating these spaces, they will leave us earning nothing. So we need to create some beautification. The modern, the young people call it the IG spots. Those are IGs for Instagram spots. So you need to create these places, and that is a kind of a natural marketing or promoting of these spaces. So you need to create these spaces where people like to make pictures. It needs to be safe, it needs to be clean, it needs to have this relaxing and entertaining movement. You can have story, it needs to have sanitary, good, and specifically in these times, it should be COVID proof. But we have enough urban space, urban green spaces in Suriname that are COVID proof and that can be COVID proof. So we can get more out of it. So, but in the end of the day, it's about the strategic transitions. How and what will we do to be able to get more out of our green spaces, not only for the tourists, but also for your local people for wellness reasons, because they have been there for ages, and yet we are still struggling in maintaining these green spaces or creating more. So we need to have the strengthen in the form of institutional strengthening. Who is responsible for what? Who are the organizations? Should we privatize some areas? We need to have some more investment in these places, and specifically product development. Why product development? Because we need to stay current. We cannot have these places being the same year after year, because otherwise people will not visit them again. And when we are talking about product development, involve communities, involve local businesses to support in product development, be innovative about it. And one of the last strategic transitions in this whole process of making urban spaces valuable for the tourism sector, but also valuable for the total society, is they need to be visible and they need to be accessible. Because if it's just a space where people cannot come, or it's too dangerous, then we still have no impact of these green spaces for the tourism sector. So in conclusion, the green spaces contribute to an improved climate. Keeping it green enhances the tourism experience. And why do I say keeping it green? Because if you already have these green spaces, look for things as solar panels, look for other forms, and of course your waste management. Look for other forms of business development that are coherent, that can comply to your green urban space. The green urban spaces contribute generally to public health. This is what we need. Mental health and physical health is important for your society. So it's not only for tourism, but it's also for our own people. It improves businesses, and in the end of the day, it contributes to your country GDP. But we need to stay current, and we need to organize it, and we need to privatize it, and we need to develop it for it can be sustainable and it can be valuable for the tourism sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sherida, for your nice presentation. Wow, I've really heard many interesting things, and I also have a lot of questions myself, but I see that people are starting to warm up as well. So I'm going to pass on some of the questions from the discussion. Oh, you can also see on your screen now a poll that is in progress. So I would like to ask everyone in the audience to please vote on the poll that you see. In the meantime, we have some questions from the audience. I will start by, let's see, Sherida was talking a lot about investment and the importance of investment, and how this, by approaching it as a business, how you can also create new investments to maintain green spaces. But I see a question from the audience, from Tijan. Shouldn't urban green spaces be free to visit, but perhaps you could promote local products, local food, so that people can generate an income? Because I know that you also mentioned, Sherida, accessibility, that it's important. So how do you balance this generating an income versus keeping it accessible to everyone?
Yes, one of the possibilities is rent spaces, pop-up stores, etc., for the free green spaces. That's one part of it. There are also, for example, small areas, and when you're thinking about urban stadsverdichting, met de stadsverdichting weer, urban densification, that you could have these small, nice restaurants, instead of having everything air conditioned, etc., have these small spaces where you can have a nice garden and people having the best dinner of their life. So it's about how you sell it and what kind of product. So you can rent spaces for stores, for pop-up places, but you can also, it's not a problem to ask a fee. The moment people know that their fee is specifically for maintenance or for the improvement, then it's then they are willing to pay. The thing is, you can have upsell on location. So you can ask, for example, for a very low entrance price, and then you have upsell on location. For example, you can also say, well, I'm not renting the booths, but what I will do, I will, everybody that sells will have a percentage of what they sell, they will deliver to the organization. But with the total income of those spaces that are not free, you are able to maintain the other ones that are free. So you can do some, what is kruissubsidie? Zeg je dat? Yeah, crisscross subsidizing those spaces, because we as a country, we are a development country in development. We cannot afford it, and in fact, we see that we are not putting enough money for these urban spaces. Because, for example, Palmertuin only is about 50,000 SODs maintenance daily per month. So the government has to do it, and now at the end of the day, we are complaining that the sanitary facilities are not good, etc. But we should ask something.
Yes, thank you for that answer. So it's not just about waiting for the government, it's about doing something ourselves as well, and trying to balance free versus
exactly. And I think something for the government, that's why I'm saying institutional, we need to look at it. For example, for the public spaces, there's something like earmarking the benefits of this place. Because now what happens is that everything that, for example, Palmertuin earns goes in this big bucket of the government, and nobody it goes to everywhere. So you need to earmark income that are specifically for the urban spaces, and then you can maintain the rest.
Yes. I see we have some questions for Pablo and Errol as well. So I will start with the questions for Pablo. There are two questions. One is, if you look at the development of urban green spaces in San Juan over the last 15 years, has it expanded, reduced, or stayed the same? And the second question to you is that you mentioned different types of sustainable tourism, such as agro-tourism, community-based tourism. In your opinion, which type of sustainable tourism has the highest potential and which has the lowest potential to successfully develop in the context of Puerto Rico?
Perfect. I will try to be brief with my answer. The first question about the urban green spaces in San Juan, yeah, no doubt, the northern region of the municipality of San Juan, which is the capital city, a lot of green spaces have disappeared because it's the highest density urban areas in San Juan. But if you move to the southern region still of the municipality, that part is still more rural, and it have a lot of green spaces. And indeed, it was 50 years ago agricultural lands, and nowadays they are secondary forests that are raising that in that region. So in some places have reduced significantly the amount of green infrastructure in the city, and in some other regions, in some other parts of the cities, have increased the green infrastructure naturally, or because have been planned by the government or by the communities. The second question was about what was the question?
About the different types of sustainable tourism, agro-tourism, community-based. Which one do you think has the highest and the lowest potential?
We have so much opportunity in terms of increasing the tourism sector in Puerto Rico in a sustainable way, because we were doing it as business as usual, the traditional kind of tourism. As you notice, only the tourism sector represents the 6% of the gross domestic product. So that means there is a lot of opportunity to improve in that area. And I believe that agro-tourism, since Puerto Rico abandoned almost 80% of our food are coming from the outside, even though we have a lot of very productive land, wonderful climate to have productive farms. But because of the context of the economic context, we abandoned those lands 50 years ago. But so that means that there is an opportunity to regain and to rehabilitate abandoned farms all over the island, and not only producing food, but again diversifying the economy by using those farms for tourism, and create regions and create tours and provide other kind of services and opportunities for visitors. So sustainable tourism have a lot of opportunity in any ways that we see it, from the community base to the agro-tourism also.
Yes, thank you. So it's all kind of interlinked as well. It's not just necessarily one or the other.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Okay, we have a question for Errol as well. The question is, let's see, you made a valid statement, Errol, that locals need to be made aware of the value of green spaces. The question is, what would be the main challenges to deal with raising this awareness? And additionally, the question came from Rachel Jeffrey. She's also wondering whether Pablo has dealt with this kind of concerns from the locals with regard to green spaces, and how have you dealt with that? So Errol, to you, what do you think are the main challenges to raising this awareness among locals?
Well, it is a very complex question, because I see that sometimes decisions are made from, people are most of the time ignorant. One of the things is that there is not enough education on schools, practical education on schools about our nature. So at school, I know that you learn about trees, about plants, but you don't know anything about any one of the trees in a city. So the thing is that the theory and the practical side of education should come more together. That there should be more students should be more in the field and more in the practical things side of education. So that's one of the big challenges because as you on the primary school, you go on with your education, you it's like sail away from the reality of the green spaces, and you learn about let's say about hurricanes, which are also important. You learn about climate change, but they don't zoom in on where can I, what contribution I can do to fight climate change, to plant a tree. Sometimes when I see that a tree is cut down in Paramaribo, then it hurts.
Errol, are you still there? I think there's a bit of an internet issue. Yeah. In the meantime, perhaps Pablo, you can also share your insights on this question. It was also if you've experienced this kind of ignorance among locals in appreciating urban green space, and how have you dealt with that in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, well, not only with locals, but we can make different categories. That kind of ignorance can come from the government, can come from the private sector, but also from communities, as well mentioned also, Harold. And I think that the most powerful tool that we have to avoid those kind of situation in the near future is education, obviously. So not only, I think that, yes, we are learning about so many things following the Earl line. We are learning so many things in the school, but I don't think that we are learning about adaptation options and tools for the climate variability and the new scenarios that we will be addressing in a very short term, right? At least in our case in Puerto Rico, that reality have changed, and the sad reality have been that we have suffered hurricanes, earthquakes, and droughts in a matter of 5 years only. And so the people are more aware now of these climate hazards that they were 30 years ago, for example. And they are understanding that there is an urgency to take actions, not only doing business as usual, but also trying to understand nature-based solutions as a potential real long-term and sustainable solution.
Yes, thank you for that answer. So we're a bit behind time, but the discussion just seems to be getting more interesting now. So I hope you all don't mind that we continue for just a couple of minutes, because I see that there's also a question for Sherida. You've been talking about developing the green spaces and making them more attractive for tourism benefits. However, development also comes with some demands to meet modern requirements. And the question is, which measures should be put in place in order to secure the environmental value of these green spaces? Because modernity comes with high technology, and as we all know, high technology and modern development is often accompanied with threats to the environment. So there is a bit of a trade-off, and which measures should we take in order to also secure the environmental value of the green spaces?
Yes, indeed. So as in the beginning of the slide, I indicated tourism has impact on different sectors, but also urban green tourism can have the same impact, but it's just a matter of how and what do you do? What type of investment? For example, instead of just generators or out of kind of energy, you can use solar energy. So in fact, we should use the modern technology specifically for developing these urban spaces. As I indicated, instead of just having food, you use great food as in healthy food, not the fast food, but great food that's good for your health. So those are the things that you can use as well. But at the end of the day, it's about the institutional, the laws, the rules, etc., that are needed to enforce that people will not invest in such a way that it will harm the urban spaces. So those are the institutional, that is the institutional side of it. So that's why I'm saying strategically, you have to look at the institutional side, and the institutional side, it's about law and order, and also about the government facilitating this development, and about organizing ourselves. What are the legal entities who will be responsible? Would it be private? Would it be public-private? So that's why we are saying that is one of the main pillars of developing urban spaces.
Lisa, can I add something to what Sherida have just mentioned about modernity and technology?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
I just want to highlight that, for example, some of my students are getting connected because they got confused and they thought that it was at 8 p.m. from Puerto Rico. And they're now getting connected. So just saying hello to them. They're now connected.
Okay.
So sorry. Yeah, that was another mistake or error. So I wanted to add to Sherry that technology doesn't necessarily mean a negative impact on the environment. And let's put, Sherry was talking about solar energy, but let's put this scenario of water pollution, for example. Water treatment plants are essential and are providing a full benefit not only for human health, but also for the ecosystem health. So those kind of technologies that were inaccessible 100 years ago, and that we were discharging raw waters into the street without any kind of treatment, now we have it accessible, right? And we are more aware of that. So technology, if it is well understood, it can be used as a powerful tool to improve the ecosystem health, and not necessarily as a negative impact on the ecosystem.
Exactly. For example, also waste management. Now there are much more modern ways for waste management, and we should incorporate that in these urban green spaces.
Great, thank you. There are still just a few questions that we can discuss before closing off. I'm sorry welcome to everybody that just joined from Puerto Rico. Sorry for the time mix-up, but we'll extend it with just a few minutes, especially for you. So there was also a question, Sherida, you were talking a bit, you mentioned just now this importance of institutions and laws and regulation. And there is a question from the audience, who should manage and maintain the urban spaces? Now, I know we have an existing structure in Suriname, but maybe we can just ask you, according to your personal or professional experience and insights, how do you think these responsibilities and roles would best benefit the green spaces? Mm-hmm. Errol, also feel free to add to that if you want.
We love authorities in the country, so maybe it should be a urban space, green space authority that would be responsible for that. So maybe we should put it under that. But it's also something about so it's something about the public and private cooperation, but then there are specific urban spaces, green spaces, that are managed by the private sector. For example, Markt. I mean, of course, Pablo doesn't know this place, but it's like a marketplace, whereas there are a lot of trees, etc. Everything is kind of in balance. So that is a private entrepreneur who is taking the responsibility of making this nice marketplace and have it as a green space. So private and also public could be managing it, but on the level of who and where you should go, then you should probably have an authority. Maybe we have too much authorities, too many authorities, but I think if this is important, then maybe there is an environmental authority, right? NEMOS also, NEMOS.
Yes.
So
Yes,
maybe
NEMOS
something,
and also, yeah.
NEMOS, yeah. Errol, you can, you know more about it.
Okay.
So, but there's
Um,
there's an entity that must be responsible for it.
to add up to what Sherida said, there's also the organization residing under the Department of Public Works. That's a green
Yes.
Openbaar Groen. So they maintain the green spaces, and I think they should probably work a little bit more with the research institutions, because so what you see is that, let's say, when they're going to maintain a tree, they rake every leaf from that tree into a bucket and throw the leaves away. But the leaves are the fruit of that same tree. So to maintain these green spaces, we have to know a little bit more about plants, about trees, about how they grow, about how they grow healthy. When I heard about the tree doctor the first time as a tree doctor, but obviously there is something like a tree doctor. You have to, because trees are how do you say it? They can be, because they have to deal with all the fumes of the cars, the heat, drought of the soil. So uh, the maintenance should be together in partnership with research organizations like Tropenbos, Celos, the Herbarium, to give the maintaining organizations some more feedback, some more input about how to keep these trees healthy and flowering. So and also to end my the thing I was saying, there should be more activities with the green spaces. You know, because people they walk past these trees, but they don't know anything about the trees in terms of how do they help regulate our climate, and how do they regulate our atmosphere and our um, the vochtigheid.
Yes, the humidity.
Lisa, I
Yes.
just want to mention something when Sherida and Anero were talking about private and public lands and our authority
Yeah.
managing green spaces in the cities. That a colleague of ours did research in Puerto Rico in San Juan, and they have an interesting result that 80% of the lands of the green spaces in San Juan are in private hands, because are in private gardens at the household level. So in single residential units, you have gardens, and those gardens also are green spaces providing services to the city, right? And they are not independent of the rest of the green spaces that could be botanical gardens or lagoons or waterways, right? So it's amazing to see that how much of the land is in private hands, but not because they are part of a private company, but because they are part of us as individuals at the household level.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so what we hear is from Errol also that it's important to, if we want to make people more aware of these benefits, it's also important to make it more visible how these green spaces are contributing. And as Pablo mentioned, it's not just on a public level, but also in the private spheres that green spaces can contribute to benefits in the city. And this is actually something that we are looking at in the in our project from Tropobos, the greener and more livable Paramaribo project. So yes, that's an interesting point that you make. I think we will have just a last question or two before closing. There was still a question for Errol. How do you think urban green spaces in Paramaribo will look like in 5 years? Better, the same, or worse? And if I may be so bold to add to that my own question as well, because you have a lot of experience on the ground. Do you think from your experience that the green spaces that we currently have in the state that they are they contributing to tourism? For example, the Palmotuin and the Cultuurtuin, which you also mentioned. And how do you think they are contributing? So the first question was...
how do I see the green spaces in 5 years? So let us pray that the green spaces will extend and will become more in Paramaribo. As member of the United Tour Guides, we were planning. We wrote a project to plant more trees. That project was not approved, but not as yet. But the plans are to grow more trees. And the thing is that I spoke with someone who about someone like a plant specialist about planting trees in the inner city, and so he gave me some insights on why people maybe are not really happy with more trees, because it blocks their sight, something simple like that. But when they know more about the benefits, and then after like a campaign to promote green spaces, then I'm sure their mind would change. So let us promote more the benefits of the trees and for inner city, and let's stay in contact with the institutions of the government to advocate more trees in the inner city, and that's what is already there. They should not cut them down or whatever, because sometimes in maintenance they tend to cut the tree down when they see it's hanging a little bit awkward. So, but there are techniques into how to somehow correct these trees that they don't fall on top car or some houses. So there are techniques in other countries. The next question is that how the green spaces contribute to tourism. So that's obvious, because something we say about things we see, for example, a city tour. People they don't know our nature. So in the middle of Paramaribo, foreigners could see an iguana, and that would be the stuff of a whole conversation about to tell more about our country, about our biodiversity, by seeing a simple iguana. So I'm sure that tourism, our green spaces contribute to tourism. Let's talk about the birds. We have about 750 bird species, which let's say about 100 of them exist in Paramaribo and the surroundings. That's a whole tour already. That's a tour of a whole day already. So, and luckily we have 2 bird species which only exist in either Suriname or the Guyanas, and those are woodpeckers. So, and I know that people come from all over the world to watch these 2 bird species, and they also exist in Paramaribo. Maybe in your backyard, you could also see them. So I'm sure that those green species are an added value, so are maybe an greater value for tourism, because they coexist with the monumental houses. You cannot separate them, especially the monumental trees.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. So we've reached the end of our discussion, but before closing, I just want to mention that you will see on your screen another poll. Unfortunately, it's in Dutch, but it's we didn't expect that so many non-Dutch speakers would be joining, but basically it's to ask the audience whether you've ever thought about this relationship between climate change and tourism, because Pablo talked a lot about climate change as well and how this is affecting tourism. And this may not be a very straightforward relationship, especially in Suriname, where we don't have hurricanes every year. So please just check that poll. And in the meantime, I see there's a last comment to Sherida. It's an encouragement to go for the Urban Green Space Authority. I very much like and support that idea. In my opinion, the private sector would have much more capabilities and clear vision as in safeguarding and developing the green space. So that is an encouragement, yes, to Sherida.
Yeah.
So we've reached the end of our discussion. I would first of all like to thank all of our guest speakers, Pablo, Errol, and Sherida. Thank you so much for making this a very interesting evening. I think it's evening well spent. We have, in Suriname, we have, how do you say, toque de queda. It's avondklok. Yeah, so it's not that we...
Pretty well.
So thank you very much for sharing your insights, and thank you for the audience for participating. You were very active with the questions. We appreciate that. And the recordings of this discussion will be available on our project website and also on our Facebook page. The website is groenparamaribo.org. We can share that in the chat. And the Facebook page is that of Tropenbos Suriname, which we can also share in the chat. The next green session we plan, because we do this every month, will be on the 29th of October. The topic is still a surprise. But for now, yeah, I just hope, and I think the speakers as well, that this discussion has given you some food for thought and has triggered you to think about the potential of urban green space for tourism and the importance of urban green space for tourism. Just for fun, you can see the results of the different polls. I think we see that some people, okay, about half of the people that answered do think about the relationship between climate change and tourism. I can also share the results of the second poll, where we asked in what ways can urban green space contribute to tourism, whether it be through the cooling effect of green, social interaction, leisure, beautification, or as an attraction because of cultural heritage or flora and fauna. And most people think that it can contribute through cultural heritage, design, flora, and fauna. All right. So once again, thank you. I'm really going to stop now, otherwise we keep going. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And hopefully...
Thank you as well.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the opportunity. It was very nice.
Okay.
Ciao.
Nice.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, Jai. Good night. Good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.